What's going on, everybody? I'm Tank, and today I'm going to be running you through a cleaning and a restringing of a 4-string electric bass guitar. And before I start, I should preface this by saying there's a lot of things I do in this video that are very specific, that are things that I've picked up on tour over the years and specific ways that I do things. And it doesn't necessarily mean that my way is better than other people's way of doing it. There are a lot of different methods that people use when they clean, when they restring, the different products they use, the different strings they like. So everything that you see in this video is just going to be the way that I do it. So if you've ever been curious on how a touring guitar and bass tech does their work, this is the exact way that I do things on the road every day. And today, we're going to be cleaning and restringing my old bass from when I was in a band. It is a Fender American Precision bass, 2006, I believe. Nothing super special about it. Everything on it is stock. I have replaced a few parts over the years. New pickguard, new bridge, some knobs and stuff like that. But we're not going to be doing any special setting up or anything like that today. This video is specifically just for a cleaning and a restring the way that I would do it on tour. So let's get started. The very first thing we're going to be doing in this video is removing the old strings. And there are a lot of different ways that people like to do this. Some people cut them right off and just pull them out. I don't prefer that method. I prefer detuning them all the way and taking them all the way out. That way you're not just cutting strings so the tension is still on there and you don't do anything to the neck. So what I'm going to do to start, take my string winder. Some people do have automatic ones that they like. I like to do it the old-fashioned way manually, just because I can actually feel it better and see what I'm doing. So we'll start here and we'll just loosen every single one of these until it gets enough slack that you can just pull it right out. And we'll repeat the process with the other 3. And we're loose. And sometimes at this point, you might want to check the nuts that are on the tuning pegs on your bass or your guitar. They get loose sometimes. There are a couple that are loose on this one. So what we're going to do is just give it a quick turn, make sure that everything is tight and good on all of them. And now we're set to take the strings out. So what I do to just make it super easy, take my string cutter, cut all the excess off there. And since we're working with bass strings, you're probably gonna have to do one at a time because of the thickness, where with a guitar, you could just do all 6 of them at once. So we've gotten rid of the slack, we'll just throw it to the side. And then at this point, depending on what type of bridge you have on your guitar, you're either gonna feed them out the back of the bridge or you're gonna feed them out the back of the guitar. And strings are gone and we're ready to start cleaning. There's a lot of different cleaning products that people use on the road, and I feel like I should mention everything I'm about to use in the rest of this video is what I like. None of this is a paid product placement or anything like that. It's not an endorsement. This is stuff that I have found over the years that I like best, and there are a lot of other products that other people go by, but everything you're gonna see here is what I prefer to use while I'm touring. So the first thing that I like to do is actually start at the back of the guitar. So we'll flip over and we're ready to go. Now when I start cleaning, I prefer MusicNomad. MusicNomad is one of the best brands that I have found on the road, and I prefer the one spray. You can spray it on any guitar finish, it works perfectly, and it's really easy to clean off and doesn't leave any residue at all. Now, a lot of people spray straight on the guitar. I prefer not to. I would rather spray onto the cloth and then wipe it into the guitar so there's not too much excess on there. So we'll start off with a few sprays. I usually go 2 or 3, sometimes 4. And a lot of people will always say when you're doing stuff like this, you always want to go in a circular motion or a same pattern. I think it's kind of overrated. I just go for it. So while I may start out doing a circular motion like this, I may get to points where I just start going around the edges and cleaning as I go like that, making sure I get every spot. And while I'm doing the back, I also like to get the sides of the guitars as well and inside the cutouts, just because then you don't have to do it later once you get to that. And once you've used a wet cloth and you're done with that, I always take a second one that's specifically just for wiping down the product that was used on the guitar. And while we're still at the back of the guitar, I like to take care of the neck as well. So what I'm going to be using here is the MusicNomad F1 oil. I use this on the back of the necks while I'm cleaning. I use it on the tops of the fretboards as well. It's got a great finish to it. It doesn't leave any residue or any streaks, and it feels really good once it's done. So pretty much the same process as we just cleaned the guitar. I start off with my wet cloth that I use, put a few drops of the F1 oil on, not too much because a little bit does a lot. Rub it into the cloth just a little bit and work it into the back of the neck of the guitar. And once that process is finished with the wet cloth, same thing, grab a dry cloth that is specifically for the F1 oil because you don't want to mix chemicals, and then just repeat the process and go up and down the neck of the guitar. Now that the back of the guitar is done, I like to flip over to the front side and start work there. And I usually start up at the headstock, work down the fretboard, and then to the body of the guitar. So we'll start at the top. Same thing on the body of the guitar that we're gonna do on the headstock. A little bit of the one spray, not too much. We'll just work it into the headstock, just around, clean out a little bit of dirt that's up there, and then wipe it down with that dry cloth that we specifically have saved for the one spray. Now what is probably the most tedious and time-consuming part about cleaning a guitar, the fretboard. There's lots of different products that people like and that people use for the frets on the guitars. Me personally, if I'm doing a deep clean, I do like using the MusicNomad product. They have a great line that wipes down all the frets, but it is kind of a liquid chemical. So when I'm in a hurry on the road, I prefer using Gorgamite. And Gorgamite's a company that's been around for a while, and they were recently bought by GHS. And you can find this pretty much anywhere, at a Guitar Center, at a Tour Supply, most small music stores. And it's great. It comes in big sheets that are about double the size of how this is laid out. And you can just cut little squares to use as you like. So I usually cut about a 2" by 2" square. And I can usually use one for the entire fretboard. So we're gonna start down here at the first fret. And usually what I do is fold this over like that, and then just start. And you just rub along the fret until you feel like you've got all the gunk and everything out of there that you can, or you're just happy with how it looks. And the crazy thing about Gorgamite is that once you're done with this, you can see how much dirt has just come off of that fret. It's insane. So we'll repeat that entire process going down the fretboard. And as you use the Gorgamite, you want to make sure you use a clean spot as you move on. So you'll see right there, I'm using a fresh part of the Gorgamite to do the next fret. And then we'll do the same thing moving on for every fret on the fretboard. And once you run out of the clean space on one side, just flip it right over to the other side. That's why I fold them in half, so you've got more to work with. And then if you run out on that side as well, then you can just open up the fold, fold over again, and you've got two fresh sides that you can finish it off with. And one thing that some people like to do is they actually use the Gorgamite on the entire fretboard as well. Personally, I don't like to do that. I like to get all of the Gorgamite off the frets and then use the F1 oil on the fretboard. So just like with everything else we've done, we always have a dry cloth for a specific product and chemical we've just used. So now we'll start at the top and we'll go down the entire fretboard, wiping off all the Gorgamite we just used on the frets. Now that we're done with the actual frets, we'll move on to the fretboard. And again, we're gonna use the F1 oil that we used on the back of the neck. It works great and it cleans off really well. So when I hit the fretboard, I usually start out by just going up and down the entire thing, and then I go back and start at the top and start wiping down every individual fret. So we'll start at 1, we'll just kind of wipe it all in, and we'll move down the entire fretboard. Now that we've got the F1 oil on the whole fretboard, we can pay attention to each specific fret on the fretboard and wipe it in even more. And then once that's all in, we go back to dry cloth and wipe down the entire fretboard to clean up the F1 oil. Now, one thing I like to do that might seem a little overkill is to clean off the sides of all the frets with another tool from MusicNomad. Now, while you're using any kind of liquid fretboard cleaner, F1 oil in this specific instance, there might be some that get stuck in the frets. So what I like to do is just go down every single one and use this almost like a file, even though it's not a file, it's a cloth. And it's just gonna pick up any extra that might be wedged between the fret and the fretboard. At this point, we're ready to clean the top of the body of the guitar. And if you have a guitar like mine that's been sitting around for a while, there's gonna be a lot of dust on it. So before you put any cleaner on it, you're gonna wanna dust it off. Again, another MusicNomad tool. This is actually called the Nomad tool. The top side of it is a cloth that you can use to get underneath the strings when they're on there to clean stuff up. And there's also a brush. So I'm just gonna go up and down the body of the guitar, brush all of the dust away. And now that the dust is cleaned away, it's gonna be the same thing as we cleaned the back of the guitar. Grab your cleaner, spray it on a cloth a few times, and then just hit every part of the top of the guitar. And if you really want to get into the fine details and really clean up some stuff that's hard to reach, you can also use one of those small Nomad tools, and you can easily get under the saddles on the bridge, wipe up any grime and dirt that might be in there. Now we're to the fun part, the actual stringing. But before we put strings on here, there's one more step I always do. This is another MusicNomad product called Tune It. And there are other products like this that I also like Big Ben's Nut Sauce and other stuff like that. And basically what this is a lubricant that goes on the saddles on the bridge and on the nut of the guitar. It prevents friction, it prevents wear and tear of the strings, and it also helps to keep the guitar stay in tune. I always put this on every string change that I do. Now the nozzle on some of these isn't as narrow as it could be to put on guitars, so this is going to seem weird, stick with me. I usually use dental picks or floss picks like this. Get a little bit of the product out, put it on the tip of there, and then you can move down towards the nut. And place it where every string would end up going on the guitar. Come down to the bridge, repeat the exact same thing there. Now we're to the point where we can put the strings on the guitar. Now me personally, I usually prefer Ernie Ball Slinky bass strings on my basses. Today, however, I'm going to be going with D'Addario NYXLs. And it's just a standard size, 105 to 45. And we're going to start all the way at the low E string. So normally what I do at this point with the guitar, where you have to feed the strings through the back of the body, is I do one at a time. So I'll go through the first hole, feed enough through that I can reach it, and then pull it all the way through. And then we'll just repeat the process with the next 3 strings. And we're ready to go. So the next part of this process is where a lot of people try a lot of different methods, and there are a lot of questions about how to actually wind the strings on a tuning peg. So I'll show you the method that I like best, which is actually pretty simple. So what I'll start out by doing is making sure all the excess is through the back, and then I'll stretch it down the neck. Now, here's where it's gonna get a little weird. Stick with me. I like to measure the exact excess length of the strings I use. Some people don't. Some people are good enough just measuring up to the second tuning peg past the one they're doing and going that way. I'm minor OCD, I like to measure. So what I'm gonna do is measure 4 inches from the tuning peg that I'm going into and cut it off there. And then we'll repeat the entire process with the next 3 strings. Now, it's also important to remember that every guitar has a different tuning peg layout. So before you start measuring, you might want to actually double check what works for you. The 4 inches that I just used may not be great for your specific guitar that you're working on. Some other guitars I work on are 3 inches or 3.5 inches. But the 4 inch is what I like to use on these Fender P basses. So now that we're at the point where we can actually put the string into the tuning peg, I like to repeat that process again by just double checking that all the excess is through the back of the bridge, stretch it out, and we're gonna put it down into the tuning peg like that. Now this is just a specific thing, but I usually like to make sure that if it's an older vintage style tuning peg like this, that I have it straight up and down like that, so that that way I can push the string forward and then just bend it around like that. And then from that point, you just wind. And it's very important on a bass that when you're winding, and a lot of other guitars, not just basses, you always feed the string under on a vintage tuning peg like this. Now, when I get to a certain point when the string is starting to get tight and there's just a little bit of looseness to it, I always like to make sure that it's lined up at the nut and it's lined up exactly on the saddle where I want it. And then I usually hold it at the saddle and then wind it the rest of the way, and we're tight. And then we just repeat the same process on the next 3 strings as we've done before. Now, I made a slight mistake while I was doing this, and I'm actually glad I did, because now I can show that you can salvage strings if you make a mistake. Now, what I accidentally did was swapped the D and the G strings when I was putting them through the back of the guitar. So when I measured out the clipping, this extra length, I actually cut the G string a lot shorter than I needed it to because it was in the D string position. But don't worry about that. Even if something like that happens, you've still got the length, as you can see. It's not a ton, but it's enough that it will work. And it's funny that that happened too, because even on the road, mistakes happen. We're all human, we're not perfect, and that has happened a lot on the road when I'm just going fast and I'm not thinking. But it's fine, we're restrung, we're ready to go, so let's move on to tuning. And now that we're onto the tuning portion of this, I just want to say that a tuner is a tuner. Yes, there probably are some that work better than others, but you can get a good tuner for between $50 and $100 that's going to work perfectly for you no matter where you're playing or where you're at. There are some tuners like the Peterson strobe that run up to $150, $200, and they are super accurate and they're great, but I really only use those when I'm doing setups on guitars. So for the sake of today's video, we're just going to use a TC Electronic Polytune 3. We use these on the road all the time and they're great. So one of the things that I cannot stress enough, that I tell people all the time, stretching strings is probably the most important part of this entire process. And I repeat it multiple times as I go through. You don't need to get super crazy with it, just stretch each string before you tune it. So what I like to do is start right up here at the 12th fret and I pull there. And while I do that, I keep a finger placed over the nut just so the strings don't slip out. And with bass strings, they're super thick, they're super strong. You can pull the out of them. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like with guitar strings, the lighter gauges. If you pull too hard on the higher ones, they will snap. It would take a lot of force to break a bass string. So give it a good pull while you do this. So we'll start at that 12th fret. We'll pull on that E string a few times, and then we'll move up to the A and do the same exact thing. We'll move up to the D, do the same exact thing, and move up to the G, and then we're ready to tune. So when you're tuning a guitar, you want to play a little lighter, but not too light. Just a little less than you'd usually play if you were playing live. Because if you play the string too hard, it's going to go sharp. And then when you start playing, it's going to be completely out of tune. So we'll start at the E. And as you can see, when I string it up, I got to an F. So we'll go down. It's very important to always tune up. There we are at our E. So we move to the A. Little flat. Go up to the A. And lastly, the G. And now the bass is in tune, but we're not done. Remember when I said stretch your strings? We're gonna do it again. So I'm gonna repeat the entire process I just did. Stretch the E, stretch the A, stretch the D, stretch the G, and tune again. And you can see, by stretching, it's throwing the strings a little bit flat. So we'll go back right onto the E, back up to the A, back up to the D, and back up to the G. And again, stretch the strings. So the E's looking pretty good after that last stretch, but I'm willing to bet that the A, the D, and the G are gonna be flat. Little bit flat. Go back up to the A. Little bit flat. Little bit flat. And because it was flat, we're gonna stretch again. And ideally, I stretch as many times as it takes until I get to the point where stretching them won't throw them flat anymore. So after that last string stretching, let's check where our tuning is now. E is very good. A, hair flat. D, pretty good. G, pretty good. And I'll bet that this last time that I stretch the strings here will be the last time I need to do this. So back to tuning. E, A, D, G. That D looked like it was falling just a hair. We're perfect, guys. We've got an in-tune bass, and there are just a couple last things I like to do before I give it to somebody on stage to play. So the last two things I'm gonna do before we're in playing stage condition are things that I actually do between every guitar swap in a live show. And I'll show you what we do right now. So we're gonna work back to the back of the guitar again. And what I'm gonna use here is a product called Finger Ease. And this isn't just for guitars, this is for any stringed instrument, classical instruments included. What I do is spray a pretty good amount all the way down the back of the neck of the guitar. Take your specific cloth for that chemical, and then wipe down the back of the neck of the guitar. And Finger Ease is great because it keeps the back of the guitar slick, it's not sticky, and when you're moving up and down the fretboard really fast, you'll get no resistance at all. And like I said, every time I get a guitar back from somebody on stage, I always like to put that back on so the next time they get that guitar, it still feels just as good as it did when they played that last song. Now, there are a lot of different products like the one I'm about to use. A really popular one is Fast Fret by GHS. I prefer MusicNomad's version of it. Same stuff, but I like this better, and it smells really good, actually. So all I'm gonna do with this is remove the cap. We're gonna start up at the top, and we're just gonna wipe all the way down the guitar, and then do the same once again on the other strings. And then the cool thing about this product is that in the top of it, they have a specific cloth that you can use. So I start back up at the top near the nut, and just wipe it all down. And that product is great for before playing because it puts a lubricant on the strings without making it really sticky or nasty, but it prevents a lot of buzz from sliding up and down. And it also, after the show, prevents corrosion from sweat and other things like that. So before and after every show, I like to put that on, as well as between songs, just like the Finger Ease. And now we've got a clean, fresh, restrung guitar ready to go. And before we finish, I just want to kind of show you exactly the sound difference between older strings and a brand new fresh set. So check out what this bass sounded like before I changed it, and then check out what it sounds like now. And there you have it. This bass is clean, it's got fresh strings, it sounds great, and it's show ready. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions about any of the stuff that I did or want more of an explanation, drop it in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And if you did enjoy this video and you'd like to see more gear videos in the future, feel free to click subscribe. Make sure your notifications are on because I release stuff all the time. And if you turn the notifications on, you'll be alerted the second new stuff comes out. If you liked this video, I would greatly appreciate the like. But if you disliked it, not a big deal, man. Feel free to click dislike, move on. I'm on a ton of different social media. I have a Discord server that you can join and we can talk more gear. I stream on Twitch from time to time, and I'll put all the links to that in the description below. My handle on everything social media related is @TankTheTech. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will be back very soon with some more gear tutorials.